Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos on how to use Seamly2D to do CAD pattern making. So here is Seamly2D opened, and first we need to hit this new button so that we can start a new project. And this is not the name of the entire project that pops up, this is the name of the pattern piece. So I'm just going to leave it as pattern piece 1, but you could call it bodice, bow tie, sleeve, whatever you want to call it, whatever you're making. And then you can choose your units that you're working in. I always prefer to work in inches. Okay, so now we have something we can actually work with. If you are opening it up and you want to start working on something you'd already started, right next to that new button is open. And here's projects that I've worked on. And I could open one of those and mess with it. Also at this point you could save it, and this is where you create an actual pattern name for the whole project. So this would be example pattern, and save, and now it is an actual project. Alright, so I'm going to be working over here on the left of my screen, if you can see that okay. And, oops, sorry. And I'm just going to kind of work through in order of the tools that you might use at some point. There's a couple I'll skip that are just a little too complicated for this video, or that just I have never found a good use for. But otherwise I will go through all of them. Alright, so in this point category right at the top left, first is the cursor. That's just if you've clicked on something and you don't actually want to use it, just click on the cursor again. Otherwise, the first actual tool is point at distance and angle. So I'm going to click that. So when we're looking at our pattern here, it'll always give you this starting red dot. That's your starting point. So you have to click onto this dot to do anything. So this one that I've clicked on, this point at distance and angle, if I click on that, I can make a line that's any length at any angle. So I'll just click over here, and it's going to tell me the length and angle that I've created. But otherwise, if I have an actual length, maybe I want it to be 10 inches at 0 degrees. 0 degrees is straight to the right, 90 degrees is straight up, 180 degrees is straight left, and 270 degrees is straight down. So if I hit OK, it creates that line for me. Now up here at the top right, I have zoom in, zoom out, zoom fit best. I'm going to click that, and then I can see the whole thing. And I am going to zoom out just a touch more to really get that in the screen. So I can again make that at any angle, any distance that I want, and it'll do that for me. So this next one, point at distance along line, if I click that, I can make a point along the line that I just created. So I'm going to click on the 2 points that make the line, so I'll start at A and then go to A1. And now I can pick any length, so maybe I want it to be 2 inches. Since I clicked on A first, it's going to be 2 inches from point A. If I had clicked on A1 first, it would be 2 inches from A1. And I'll just hit OK, and there's our line. So now this line over here, point along perpendicular. This is really nice. This creates a perfectly 90-degree angle from whatever line I give it. So if I click that, let's say the line that I want to start with is A to A2. And it's going to create a line exactly 90 degrees from that line. And let's say the length of that, all we do at this point, I know there's a lot of buttons on here. The only thing I'm trying to do here is create the length, so maybe I want that to be 5 inches tall. Hit OK. I could also change the angle slightly, like maybe if I didn't want it exactly 90 degrees, maybe if I wanted it 80 degrees, I could change that at this point, but that's not something we're going to do right now. Alright, so there we have it. This line is 5 inches tall, exactly 90 degrees from this line. Okay, so the next one is if I can get this to highlight so you can see it, it is a point along a bisector. The name for some reason not pulling up, but it's this one that's highlighted in blue right now. So if you click that, we actually, what it does is create this little red line, which is halfway between these 2 points. So it'll find this angle and put it exactly halfway between, which is really great, especially if you're not working in exacts. Like this is 90 degrees, so halfway is 45. But if you're working with something different, it makes it really fast and easy. So the way to use this once you've clicked on it is you need to outline the two that you want to go in the middle of. So I'm going to start at the top of this, come down to the bottom, and go out, and it automatically creates the angle that we want. The only thing we need to add in now is the length, and let's just say 4. Hit OK, and now that's 4 inches long, exactly halfway between these two. This row here we're actually going to skip. I've never, ever figured out a good use for special point on shoulder, and it's complicated to use. This point at intersection of arc and line we can come back to, but there's other easy ways to do this too. But I can't show it to you until we've done an arc, which is later. So we're going to come down to this one, the triangle tool. So what this does, I'm going to choose the line I want to point on, and I'm going to choose what 2 points it's angling at, if that makes sense. So if you click on the triangle tool, if I start on this line over here, let's start on that. So I'll start on this, and it's creating that line. Okay, now I want to triangle something to that line. So if I were to hit A1 and then hit A3, if it'll let me click it, oh, it won't because that's the line we're putting it on. This line A1 is the base point to create a triangle somewhere on this line A to A3. You can see that kind of moving around there. So what you would click next, if, for example, I want to triangle through this point A4, I want a line that goes straight from this point A1 over to this line, and I want it to go through this point A4, I would click that. And it creates a triangle there for me. So again, this would be used really just like, again, if you want this point to connect up to this line, and you don't know where you want it to connect, but you know that it needs to go through this point here, that would be a really good use for that tool. Alright, so this next one, point from X and Y, I use this all the time. So this just squares something off. So if you click that, it gives us a really nice guide here in pink or purple, however this is showing up. So we need to click whatever point on this vertical line that we want to line up to. So I'll click A4. So now it's on the vertical line of A4, and now I need to pick horizontally, or what layer, I guess, that I want it to attach to. So if I want this point to be horizontally where A5 is at, I could click A5. If I want it all the way up here at A3, I could click A3, but it's going to put it exactly horizontal to those points. Alright, so this next one is perpendicular point along a line. So what we would do with this, if you look at this tool, you would start at this bottom point and then choose what line you want it perpendicular to. So if I have this point A2 and I need it to come up here and be perpendicular to, let's see, maybe from A to A4, okay? I want to connect those so it's perpendicular. I would hit A2, okay, and then I need to click the 2 points that I want. Oh, I unclicked it for some reason. There we go. Click A2, and then I'm going to click the 2 points on the line that I want this to go perpendicular to. So I'll start at A. You can see this is trying to, it keeps it perpendicular wherever I'm going. So I want it to be to A4. And it creates a line perfectly perpendicular from A to A4 that goes to A2. Alright, so this next one right here is the point of intersection, if I can get this to highlight for you. It's the point of intersection of a line and an axis. So if we click on that, we're going to choose what line we want for this point. and then we pick a base point, and then we choose the angle. So we need to like create a line we want it to come off of. So let's just pick this first line we made over here, A3 to A, okay? And then we're going to choose, let's say A6, because it's floating out here by itself. Okay, and it's just going to float around, and if you see, it's going to go across that line somewhere. You can click wherever you want it to go across that line. So you can make your own angles here and make it look like whatever you want it to look like. But if I right click that and hit options, I can choose any angle I want. So I could put 270 degrees, I could put 210 degrees, and it keeps it on that line. Starting from this point, creates that line across these. This one just gives you a little bit more customization than just strictly perpendicular. This one, instead of 90 degrees, you can do any angle you want that line is going to come off of. Now this last one, the midpoint between 2 points, I use this a lot as well. This literally just creates a point exactly halfway through 2 points. So if I click on A4 right here and then A1, this pops up because I can actually divide it into multiple things, which is one of the reasons I love this tool so much. But if we go down here and just hit apply, bam, right in the middle. If we hit divide it by 4, there we go. So you can divide it by anything you want, which is one of the reasons I love it. But otherwise, if you do it, click 2 points and just hit enter, it's automatically going to divide it in half. Alright, so that's everything I'm going to show you in Point for now. So let's go down to line. This one doesn't do a whole lot. This one right here, the line between points, all this is literally is a connector line. It's not creating any points. So if I just want to say visually I need to see this connected to this, or I need to know that angle or something, you can just connect those 2 points. This next one, point at line intersection. So this is how we would find the exact center point if 2 lines intersect. So just for kicks and giggles, let's take this line between points and draw 2 lines. So let's go from A3 to A10, and look at that's going across a couple things. So let's click this point at line intersection and start at A3, go to A10, and then pick another line. Let's say A4 to A. And look, it's going to put a point exactly in the center of this. The points are really important. Lines are visually we can see them, but when it goes to actually printing a pattern, if you have to click somewhere to create the pattern, which I'll show you in a little bit, there has to be points everywhere that you need things attached to, or to cut, like if I wanted another line coming off of this, there has to be a point there, so that's why you would use this. Alright, so next up is curve. There's quite a few things to use here. I really only ever use a few of them. This simple curve is a very simple tool. I don't use this a lot just because of the type of pattern making that I do, but depending on what you do, you might use it a lot. So all you do is click 2 points, okay, and it's going to create a curve. And I know it doesn't look like much right now, but you can literally just grab that curve and start moving it around. And you can make it look like anything you want it to look like. You can drag these red lines, and if they're shorter, they don't pull it very far. If they're longer, they pull it really far. You can right click on those, hit options, and you can change the length and angles of those little points that are dictating it. I mean, you can do a lot with it, or you can just grab it and drag it. So maybe if you're quilting and trying to just make a picture, that would be a good tool for that. And then this next one, segmenting a simple curve, all that does, if we click on the curve, when we're working with curves, we don't click on any points, you click on the curve itself. So click on that curve, and maybe I want a point 2 inches into that curve. I can just put 2 in that box, hit apply, there, 2 inches in. Alright, so let's do another one, just to show you. In this box where it says curve and it drops down, that is the name of this curve. So you could click there and type in splice A6 to A9, and we could say divided by 2. And it'll put it exactly in the middle of that curve. So if for some reason you need to know exactly halfway through this distance, you can do that, okay? Or, let me right click that again, hit options. If you don't want to type in that, you can hit this F of X button, and this is starting to get a little more complicated than I want to go into at this point. But just delete that in the formula, and then you can come in here and look at length of curves, and these are all the curves we made so far. And you could choose one of those, divide it by half, whatever. Alright, so then this next one, this one I use a lot more. Curve tool, which uses points as control handle. I use this quite a bit for necklines and armholes. So you need 4 points to go off of. So let's click on that. The first point is where you're starting the curve off. I want it to start at A4, for example. And then I want it to come down to, I want to curve down to this bottom and all the way over to 1. So I'm going to grab point A2, A10, A1, and it uses these points to direct that curve. This is why I use it for necklines and armholes, because it gives me a much more precise curve here that I can use other angles and points to get me. And then obviously just depending on where you click, what points, it's going to change the shape of that curve. Alright, this next one is kind of wild. It's curved path. I don't ever use this one. To me, this is very similar to this first simple curve, that it kind of has a mind of its own. So let's just click a few points. It's just going to start curving anywhere it wants to. It'll go forever unless you hit enter, and then it's just over. And then you can grab each one of these curves and move it however you want it, do all sorts of things. As you can see, it just gets kind of wild, but again, if you're doing quilting and need kind of a wild motion and stuff, that might be something really great for you. I'm going to click on that, right click it, and hit delete though, because it's a little bit too wild for me to even see what's going on at this point. And actually, I might clean up a few of these lines, just to simplify what we're looking at here. Alright. Let's see, that's good enough for now. Alright, so this next one, segment a curved path. That's very similar to this one up here, segmenting a simple curve, segment a curved path. Again, it's if you have this big path going on, you can put a point on it. Alright, tools for creating curves. So this is like the more complicated version of curve tool. This is the one I use a lot. Both of these really are just upgrades from these first two. Like, this is that simple one curve. This is a lot of curves. This is a curve that I have more control over. This is a lot of curves that I somewhat have more control over. I don't ever use this one. It's just too much to me. Alright, this one here. Point intersection curves. This one's kind of cool. If you have two curves and you need to know exactly where they intersect, you can do this. So really quick, let's draw. I guess I should have kept that other curve. Let's draw a curve that's going to go through our other curve. I'm going to go A6 to A9, and then I'm going to grab it. Oop, too far. Scroll back up, scroll back up. There we go. I'm just going to drag it so it goes through this line. Look at that. Bam. Alright, so if I hit this button here, point intersection, it's where those two curves intersect. So if I click that, all I'm going to do is, again, click on both curves, and bam, there you go. If I click it again, click, click, look, it put a second point in that same spot. And if you want it over here, all you have to do is right-click on that point, hit Options, and all it's doing, it has these presets of the highest point and leftmost point. So let's just say lowest point and rightmost point, and hit Apply, and look, now our point's on this one. That way we can specify which intersection we're putting a point at. Alright, this last one here, this is the point intersection, if I can get it to highlight so you can see it. It's not going to highlight. Point of intersection with a curve and an axis. So again, it just creates a point on a curve, but this one's based off a line. So if we click that, let's click on this curve way down here. And then I'm going to click on this point A10, and it will put a point literally anywhere in there based off of A10. So I'm just going to click there for now. if I right click on it and hit options, I can designate what angle I want it to be, or I can just drag that point around when I'm putting it on if I want to. Again, it gives us a little bit of customization there. Alright, so that is everything in curves. Next we're going to go over to this arc button, and this creates some cool stuff. I'm going to zoom out just a touch so we can create some more stuff over here. Alright, so in arc, and each of them do have this pointer button to get yourself out of whatever you've clicked on. Alright, so let's just start with arc. If we click on that, let's just start with this point A1. So this I use for things like circle skirts. You could use it for specialty bodice tops, all sorts of different things. Again, if you're doing quilting, I'm sure there's a million uses for this. You pick a radius, let's just say 3 to keep it kind of small. The first angle is 0, the second is 90. So in this application that we're using, 0 degrees is straight to the right. Also 360 degrees is straight to the right because that's a full circle. 90 degrees is straight up. 180 degrees is straight left, and 270 degrees is straight down. So this is going to start to the right and straight up with a radius of 3. So hit OK, and there we go. It started right, went up, and our radius is 3. You do have to know a little bit of math for some of this. Alright, so that's all that one does. Again, we could have made that longer. If I right click on that, I can change it. If my second angle is 180, look at now I have a half circle instead. Alright, so this next one, segment and arc, it's just like the other segments we've done. If I click on this curve, let's say I want 5 inches. Okay, it's going to put a point at 5 inches. Right click that. You could also type in the name of this arc. Arc underscore A1 to A1 to 25, and I could hit divided by 2, and it'll give me a point exactly halfway in my arc, which is of great use sometimes. Alright, this next one, the point of intersect of an arc and an axis. This is similar to some of those curved ones. If we click this arc, and then let's pick a point, this point, there we go. It's just going to intersect that arc at some point based on an angle. So if we click here, I can right click on that point, made options. Maybe if I want it to be straight intersected straight across of that point. So I'm going to change my angle to 0, hit OK, and now I know that's perfectly to the right of this point. This next one here intersects 2 arcs. So real quick, let's make a second arc. Let's just start it at A10, radius of 5. Let's just say 0 to 90. Those should intersect. There we go. Yes, they do. Alright, so let's click this button, point of intersection between arcs. Go ahead and click that, and all we do is click these 2 curves, click, click, and it automatically puts a point where they cross each other. Alright, so then this last one, these 3 points I don't ever use for anything, because the intersection point of circles is really the same thing as this intersection of 2 arcs. To make a full circle, all you would do is right click on options. Your second angle would be 360 instead of anything else. Okay, so now my point is circles intersecting, so I don't see the point of this point of intersection circles. Point from circle and tangent, I don't really ever use that. Again, this is the same as this one, and then arc with a given length. This I might use sometimes. So, really quick, I'm going to delete this circle, but first I have to delete that point of intersection. Okay, so an arc with a given length, this one's really interesting. What this does, let's click on A1. So if our radius, let's make it 5, because the other one's 3. Our first angle is 0 again. Instead of picking a second angle for this to go to, maybe I specifically just want an arc that's 10 inches long, like if I'm making a waistband maybe. So I would hit OK, and now that arc starts at 0 degrees and it stops when it gets to 10 inches. Next, we are going to work on these elliptical arcs, or I guess that's the next button. I have never used an elliptical arc. It doesn't make any sense to me. If someone wants to mess with it, go for it. I'm sure there's a purpose. But otherwise, that's the last of our drawing functions. You can do anything you need with those functions, really anything from that. All right, so next we're going to go to operations, though. So this is where we get a couple last little things. The only thing I use in here is the dart function. Okay, these are all just like mirroring things and moving stuff around. I've never used them. I don't see any purpose to it because you can do all of that in the details by just printing out two of things and so forth. But anyways, this true darts I do use. So really quick, I am going to go up to this point and clear this up for a second by drawing a couple points down here to show you a dart off of. So let me just come straight down. Let's make that 7. Straight down is 270. I'm going to come to the right. Let's say 15. Let's divide that in half. And then I'm going to come up. Let's say 5, and then I'm going to go 2 inches to each side. Alright, so if I were making something with a dart, there has to be a few points. So when you're drawing things out, you do know where your darts will be. So like obviously from here to here to here, that's going to be a dart for those of you who know how to do darts. And this is the line that that dart is falling on. But those of you who have sewn darts, you also know that when you do a true dart, you have to add fabric over here, and sometimes it's complicated figuring out how to do that. So in this operations button, there is this true darts button. If you click on that, what you're going to do, so the line that your dart is on, start with that. So left to right, create the line that that's on. And then we're going to outline the entire dart from the bottom to the top. So starting point, top of the dart, ending point. And look at that. It creates the dart with the added space you're going to need so that once you sew it together, it still falls together correctly. This is like game changer for me when I'm doing any sort of clothing design in this, because it saves me a huge headache manipulating. When you're doing fabrics on paper, you can manipulate it and move things around while you are manipulating it. But when you manipulate things in a computer, you can't just cut it out and grab it and move it. So this makes a big difference for me. Anyways, all it really does is add those points. If you click on these 2 points, you can see the line, but otherwise you can't. So when I do darts, I do like to come into this line part and draw those outlines visually, which is one of the reasons I like that tool, because then I can just remember. It just, sometimes I get like 200 points going, and it's hard to keep track of stuff. So that really helps me out having that there. Alright, so that is the only operation really that I use. Next we're going to get into detail. So detail is when we're actually going to start creating the patterns and printing things out. Alright, so this first one is what you're going to use more than anything else ever. So this is to actually make a pattern. It's a workpiece tool. I don't know why some of these names aren't popping up, but this is your workpiece tool. This little, it shows a bodice with a plus sign. So if you click on that, you always want to go through your points in a clockwise motion, okay? So for example, let's just pretend this is a piece. I'm going to start at A3, go to A6. Let's just grab this curve. Why not? I'm going to stop it where that little point intersects that curve. I'm going to go down to part of this dart, come down, and then I'm going to hit enter once I've highlighted everything. Okay? And this is what's really great. When you add, so this curve, this would have grabbed that entire curve had I not put this point intersector there. So where that intersects that curve, you can like actually splice the curve in half, and when you're highlighting your patterns, you can end it there, which is great when you're doing different patterns that you need stuff to go in the middle of a circle. So anyways, this is the order of it all, which is great. If for some reason your splice, you'll learn to do curves in a clockwise motion, but if for some reason it's going the wrong way, it's not going to grab the curve. See how the line jumped off the curve? If yours looks wrong, just come in here. Something might be in the wrong order, like maybe something's literally out of order, and you're like, why isn't this point in there? Well, it's not going clockwise. And then your splices are the curves. You can right-click that, hit reverse, put it back in the correct order that you need to be in. All you do is hit OK at that point, and that's now added it as a pattern piece. Okay, so for right now, that's all I'm going to show you on that to show you where to get to your pattern pieces that you're creating with this workpiece tool. So up here at the top, draw is what we've been in this whole time, drawing out our pattern. But now that we've created a pattern piece, we can go to Details, and I'm going to hit Zoom Fit Best again, and I'm going to zoom out just a touch. And look, all we see is that pattern piece we made, nice and neat. And then we can actually do quite a bit from this to add details to this pattern and get it ready for printing. But for right now, I just want to show you a couple extra things you can do. Let's go ahead really quick and right-click that pattern piece and hit Options. So there's quite a bit we can do to this. Again, you can change the order again in here if you need to mess with it some more. If you hit Seam Allowance and turn Seam Allowance on, we can add Seam Allowance to the whole pattern. Let me hit OK, and look at now there is a 1/2 inch Seam Allowance the whole way around. I have changed the setting in mine. I like to sew with a 1/2 inch Seam Allowance. That's what I use most often based on my preferences and my sewing machine. You can set your own preferences. If you want to set a automatic Seam Allowance, go to File and then Preferences. From there, you're going to click on this pattern button, and right here it says Seam Allowance. Mine's at 1/2 inch. You can put anything you want in there, and then just hit Apply, OK, one of those two. Okay, so if you did that, when you get to the Seam Allowance, mine is always on default. My default is 1/2 inch, but you could also change it right there. Maybe I want it to be 0.75. Okay, let's just hit OK. Alright, so if for some reason, let's say I need a line across this, or somewhere in my pattern there needs to be a line. So if I was making a skirt, I might need a line somewhere, or a shirt even, saying, if you want the shorter version of this pattern, cut here. If we go back to draw, and we're just going to throw a random line on so I don't have to add more points. But we would go down to this insert node. It kind of looks like a chain link almost with a plus sign. So if we click that, we can add little points to this. So let's just, for example, let's hit A8 and add that as a point. Hit OK. And then this tool right here, Internal Path Tool, if I click that, I'm now going to go from A8 to maybe that curve, who knows. And then I'm just going to hit Enter. I'm going to add it. I have to choose which piece, and I'll show you how to rename this in a second so they don't all say detail. And then I'm going to hit Cut on Fabric. Hit OK, and that line is now showing up on here. So you can add little lines to your pattern as necessary that will print with it. The other thing that you could use that for, if we go back to Draw and go back to that Internal Path tool, we could have a custom seam allowance. So maybe we're cutting on the fold. So I'm going to start at A17, go up to A3, because remember we're working clockwise. Hit Enter, and instead of just cutting it on the fabric, in the type of path, we're going to put custom seam allowance. Put it on the detail piece and hit OK. Now in details, I'm going to right click it, hit Options. You need to double check that it's not getting rid of any of the points you need otherwise in seam allowance. Now we can do some custom work in here. So let me drag this into screen. So down here we have custom seam allowance, but I can actually do it up here. So I have these nodes up here, which is why we add nodes. So at A3, which is this one at the top, before that, if I don't want there to be anything here because I want to cut it on the fold, I definitely don't want to add allowance if I'm cutting on the fold. So before, I want it to be 0, and after can be the regular allowance. I'm going to hit Apply without exiting out of this, and look at that seam allowance up there is gone. So then this point down here is A17. So now come to Node, and we're going to choose A17. Before it, because we're working in clockwise, leading up to it still needs to be the regular seam allowance, but afterwards, I don't want any seam allowance. Hit apply, okay, and look at now there is no seam allowance on that one side. So you can do a lot with these little nodes and extra lines and things that you might need to add. From this, you can also, if you right click and hit options, when you come to this label point, instead of, this is where you can change a lot. So this name of detail right here, that's why it kept saying detail. I could call this bodice if I wanted to. And now in everything in this, anytime I right click anything or add nodes, it would be called bodice. I can also get this to print onto the pattern by hitting edit template, and we need to create a template. So I hit this plus button. I'm going to delete this part that says empty. Let's say you can add any of this information to it, by the way. And let's just say the piece name. Let me make sure I'm clicking the right one. Yeah, piece name. Hit OK. And name is bodice. Hopefully I did that right. Sometimes I hit the wrong button. And then you want to come over here to label. You want the detail label to be visible. We can change the width and the height of that label and then hit OK. And yeah, there we go. So it says bodice and the exact height and everything that we've wanted. There's a lot you can put into that label. Go back to label, say edit template. We can add all sorts of things if you hit that plus button. Insert, you know, the piece name, the orientation, the quantity that you want to cut. You can add the pattern name. So I saved this as example pattern. Every single piece could print saying example pattern, which is great if you keep your pattern so you know what goes to what if it all comes undone. You can even have the date and information on here. And then you can save if you have a very specific order that you want all this information to be in, because it obviously takes a while to add all that information if you're going to print a lot. You can save a specific template of your information here. And I didn't just because there's only one thing in here. And all you would do, so if I have a new pattern piece, because every single pattern piece in here that we create, we have to add a label if you want it to print. Instead of adding all this information every single time, you just hit open and add this in. And here's one I have previously with all this information in the order that I want it to be in so that all my pattern pieces are the exact same. And then you just hit OK, and anything you type in those boxes will show up. So if I were to add quantities and a letter for a pattern, all of a sudden that's going to show up as well. Alright, so all that's left at this point is to export the pattern. To do this, we click this last button at the top called Layout, and it's automatically going to ask us for what size we're printing on. If you are printing from your home printer, it needs to be custom, and you might just have to mess with your width and height just to get it to the right size. I have a wide format printer that prints on a 24-inch roll, so I use that. But otherwise, if you're using your home printer, click that. Also, make sure this divide into strips button, that needs to be off. You do not want it divided. Hit OK. Just hit yes. It's automatically going to create this the right size that you want. And then you export it by hitting this purple arrow. So this is the folder it's going to save it in. You could browse and choose a different folder, create a folder if you want, but when you download this, this is automatically going to create a folder for you. Your file format, if you have a specialty printer like I do, it's going to tell you what it needs. Mine needs PDFs. Otherwise, you need to, if you are printing from your home printer, you need to click PDF tiled files. What that's going to do is going to break this entire picture into sizes that will fit onto printer paper to be taped together. It's going to show you the lines to cut on. It's going to number the papers in order for you, so if they all fall apart, you know how to tape it together. It's incredible. Down here, you can change the name. So if I'm doing custom work, I could be like, maybe this is Martha's dress for wedding. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. And then you just hit OK. It saves it. And then you pull it up in your file folder on your computer and print it from there. I hope this was super helpful. I hope it's got your excitement going to start using this, got some creativity working in your brain already on some different stuff you can do with this. There is a lot more to this that I can still teach you, but for now, those are all the basics. So if I would definitely recommend playing around with all of these basic tools, getting the hang of them. Just start making little goofball messes and seeing what you can create from that. And I hope you like this video and subscribe for the rest in the series and for some fun project ideas. Bye.